All right, welcome back. It's now time for my explainer tonight. And the president this week had that speech from Mombasa, talked about a raft of issues. But one of the most important things he talked about was restructuring in several sectors of the agriculture sector. So tonight I'm here with Timothy Njagi. He's a research fellow at Tegemeo Institute. They take a lot of interest in matters food security in this country. So I'll just run you through a number of those issues that are important. This was the big statement that the president made here this week. He said his intent this year is to ensure that there is more money in the farmer's pocket. That's been a big complaint, right? Okay, so once he said that, let's just take a look at some of the statistics and the issues, just so that you can understand exactly what we're dealing with here and the state of food security in the country. So, some of these figures have been updated, so I will take you through what they are. So our consumption of wheat, for example, is 900,000 tons in the country, and we import 75% of all of the wheat that we consume. For rice, in fact, according to the very latest statistics, it's not in fact 75, but we import 90% of the rice that we consume in the country. And for sugar, we're importing nearly half of what it is we consume in the country. And get this, according to the latest statistics, that's from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and from the Economic Survey 2018, we spend up to $1.7 billion in this country importing basic food items. Now that is staggering. Moreover, imagine, a lot of poor people are spending quite a bit of money, their income, on food. 70% of the amount of money that poor people are earning in this country goes to food. So these are some of the interesting things. And farmers have not been left behind. In fact, they're net buyers from the market. So they don't produce everything that they're able to eat. And this is why the president has focused on this. So let's get into those raft of measures now that we understand exactly what we're dealing with at the moment. So on the tea sector, these were some of the things that he talked about. He wants to restructure the governance of KTDA. He says only registered tea growers will be allowed to sell tea. And he wants the Kenya Tea Development Authority to pay farmers 50% of their deliveries and the rest in bonus, right? And then gazetting the tea regulations. So Tim, after you've seen all of these recommendations from the president on the tea sector, what are your thoughts around this? Is it a step in the right direction? First of all, restructuring KTDA. I saw a couple of people saying it's a private company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think to begin with, we start with the restructuring of the governance sector, especially around the KTDA. So as you correctly said, KTDA is a private company. So everybody was kind of trying to figure out how does that happen. But I think just for the background for the viewers, is that recommendation is not coming out of the blue. This recommendation was proposed in the latest Tea Task Force report, which was done in 2016. Unfortunately, this report has not been released. So what you can find actually is just people trying to explain what is in that report.
Right.
I think one of the key things that also is in the recommendations, in the regulations, is that there's need to register tea growers. And the reason behind this, again, is also explained in the Tea Task Force report, is that right now there's a lot of tea hawking. And what that does is that it makes a lot of tea companies, especially the smaller ones, to be completely unviable. They cannot be able to meet their cost. So what they're saying is that tea growers will be registered to the factory where they need to be selling. And then, so that would make sure that you
cut out the middlement?
Exactly. You cut out the middleman.
Sokohuru or mukohoro.
Yes. So you not only cut the middleman, but you also kind of get information that will allow you to decide which companies or which factories need to be closed because they're not viable. So for the key thing is that for them to operate competitively, they need volumes. So they need to be operating at a certain level of efficiency. I think the recommendation to pay farmers 50% really makes sense. So currently farmers still get some money, but this money is not enough. It actually barely covers the variable cost. So like last year, I think they're being paid like 14 shillings per kg per month. But then you realize that the tea picker will be asking for between 11 to 13 shillings per month. So increasing the monthly payment actually makes sense to farmers, actually to create interest, because it makes no point for telling a farmer that we'll pay you a big chunk of money at the end of the year. And then when the end of the year comes, you realize that it's not that much.
And then there's tea regulations, because I want us to move quickly to the other ones, because there's also value addition, and that's part of this.
So Actually, these were developed last year, and they have some strong recommendations that would actually improve the tea sector. So one of them is the diversification of the market. So currently, most of our tea is just sold as black tea.
Right.
And every time there's an overproduction, then we get very poor prices. And last year is a good example for that. So in line with also what the CS mentioned yesterday in his brief, is that they're supporting the KTDA to add additional lines that will diversify the teas that they're producing. So they'll start producing orthodox tea, the other blends that they can now sell. Right. And the good thing is that these blends actually attract much more prices, much higher prices than the black tea. Okay. So that would actually mean more money to the farmers.
All right. Yes. I just want us to move now quickly to the reforms within the coffee sector. Yeah. Let's just talk really about this one, because you know this is the money. Yes. This cherry fund, what is it and how will it help coffee farmers?
So the cherry fund came from the recommendation of the the coffee task force, and basically it's a fund that was created to enable farmers borrow money at very low interest rate. I think it's about 3%, and this money would be recovered from their output. Once the coffee is sold, then they will recover the money and then give the balance to farmers. So part of this is because the task force recognized that coffee production has really come down. Okay. So right now we are producing less than what we were producing in the 1960s. Wow. The annual production right now is only about 40,000 metric tons, which is below it's like the pre-independence period. Wow. That is when we're producing those volumes. So for us to get farmers back interested in coffee, there's a lot of investments. So there's need for new varieties, which again, right now, the cost went up because of some changes they made. Coffee research is not able to generate those varieties for farmers as before. Okay. Then there's also the cost of inputs. And right now, the key things is actually like things like fertilizer, labor. So the farmer would be able to borrow to be able to fund those operations.
And at a lower
interest rate.
Okay, milk. This is something that everybody has been talking about. So more money. That's 500 million to buy excess. There's also milk plants in Nyeri, Nyahururu, and then the 16% VAT. Just in a nutshell, maybe without going into each of those, do you think these raft of measures, including now new KCC, will be buying milk from farmers at a higher price? Yeah.
So the first one is just a short-term measure. It's good news for farmers, but only in the short term. Right. In the long run, they're still going to suffer. The challenge with the dairy industry, of course, has been said a lot, is the cost of production is still very high. And for context, right now, I think on average, it takes about 20 to 30 shillings to produce a liter of milk. The cost of dairy meal is about 40 shillings per kg. So the agronomy, I mean, what they say that if you use a kg of dairy meal, you add a liter of milk. So if you're buying it at 40 shillings and you're selling it at 25 shillings, it doesn't make sense to make that investment. Okay. So we need to find out how to bring that cost. The two key commodities that we need to, the two key cost items for dairy production is labor and the cost of feed.
Yes.
But the most important one is the cost of feed.
Right.
The cost of feed, again, is another thing that we really need to affect if we are to help the dairy farmers. Okay. But the investments for Nyeri and Nyahururu, we still have to remember that this is investment in new KCC. And of course, as an economist, I would argue against government doing business. It's better off if government regulates the private sector.
And then allow it to thrive. Okay. Okay. I'd like us to, I know you want to talk about that, but let's talk about these other crops. And this is potatoes, bananas, and rice. So first of all, there's
the cold storage.
The cold storage, yes.
Yeah, I think this is a good investment. And I think we need to strengthen the county's investments in the cold storage value chains. Okay. And this will be good, especially for potatoes, bananas, and other horticultural commodities. I think this one on the rice.
How is it we're purchasing excess? And we literally import 90% of the rice that...
Yes, I think this was just either a typo or a long classification of it. But I think what is happening right now is that even the government agencies are going to buy the imported rice, which is much cheaper than our local produced rice. So then for the local farmers, then it looks like they don't have a market. So he's trying to create a market for them. Okay. But I think the key thing is actually to try and make the rice production more competitive. And one of the ways we can do that is to increase the area under irrigation. So unfortunately, like the big project in Mwea kind of seems to have stalled. So we need to get that so that we can have more water and more cycles for farmers to improve rice production.
So Tim, overall, when you take a look at these recommendations that he made, good for farmers, and also, I mean, I want to know, I might not be a farmer, but food is expensive, you know, for all of us. So is this good news for the farmer? Is it also good news for me? Will food be now more affordable?
In the short run, it's good for farmers, not necessarily in the long term.
Okay.
So we really, and for the consumers, it may not necessarily make any difference, because what makes sense for what will actually be good news for the consumers is long-term measures to improve agriculture and transform it to become more commercial and more competitive.
Okay.
So the reason I'm saying that is that even for the milk, remember that as an economist, I would argue that the amount given to increase the payment to farmers is basically a transfer. Because they are buying at a much higher price than what the market is offering. So it's not really for efficiency, but it's just basically a transfer. So if we do that in the short term, it may be good for the farmers, especially to make sure that they're not demotivated, to keep them going on, and then we can support them to increase production, and then hopefully in the long term we'll start seeing sustained increases in productivity, which will actually be now good news for the consumer.
Okay, thank you very much. Timothy Njagi, who's a research fellow at Tegemeo Institute, just breaking down what the president talked about, those raft of recommendations in the agricultural sector. Good news for consumers, Timothy says, not quite. For farmers, in the short term, yes. I keep hearing this from a number of food experts. I hear that we need an agricultural transformative strategy. Well, that's his thoughts, and now you understand what that was all about. So let's take a break.